Okay, I think you'll agree that that video was very impressive, showing what a 500-kilometer object would do if it slammed into the surface of the Earth. I think it's pretty obvious what that would do for any sort of life at the surface of the Earth. If an asteroid vaporized the entire, well, all of the oceans on the Earth, then it melted the rocks under the ocean and vaporized the entire asteroid and part of the surface of the Earth, so that the entire Earth's atmosphere would have been superheated rock vapor. We're going to continue now, and I'm going to show some scientists here, and I'm not implying that these scientists agree with what my viewpoint is. Probably most of them do not agree with me. A few probably do. Dr. Hugh Ross and Dr. Rana, for example, probably do. But many of the scientists I'm going to show you their scientific evidence that they have discovered. That does not mean that I'm claiming that they agree with my point of view. The gentleman here in this slide is Dr. J. William Schopf. Dr. Schopf is from the University of California, and he has discovered the oldest fossils of Earth life, microfossils, and they are from 3.5 billion years ago. The fossils that Dr. Schopf has found cannot be distinguished from modern-day living cyanobacteria, and those modern-day living cyanobacteria are photosynthetic life. So one wonders if evolution is constantly changing organisms. How is it? It seems that 3.5 billion years is a very, very, very long time for any organism to go, with no sign of evolutionary change. This is Dr. Minik Rosing. Dr. Rosing is from the University of Copenhagen in Denmark. Dr. Rosing has found even older evidence for photosynthetic life on Earth. He has found isotopic evidence, and we will try to show a reference at the end of the video to a video that he presented where he talks about this. But he has found isotopic evidence for photosynthetic life that is at least 3.8 billion years old. So in other words, after the most intense part of the Late Heavy Bombardment, there is evidence for photosynthetic life on the Earth, found by Dr. Rosing. Now we're really going to go into part 2. Everything that we just discussed was a review of part 1. And for those of you that were not present, which is most of you, if you're watching this video, if you're not present at the original part 1, that's why we wanted to review part 1. And now we'll be going into part 2. Scientific Problems for the Naturalistic Origin and Evolution of Life, part 2. What I have here is a slide showing a page, or a figure from a page from the journal Science. And this is from April 30th, 1993. And what this is the microfossils that Dr. J. William Schopf found in Australia. And they are dated from 3.5 billion years old. You, I'm sure, have heard many people claim, such as, for example, Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson claims it. He's a popularizer of science. Many people familiar with him. He claims that multicellular life took billions of years to occur on the Earth, and for him that's evidence for evolution. Well, if we look at these 3.5 billion year old microfossils, you notice something here, is that the end cells are conical and are different than the rest of the cells. The definition of a multicellular organism is that it has differentiated cells. Well, in these 3.5 billion year old cells that Dr. Schopf found, for example, right here at the end of this cell, or end of this organism, and the end of this organism, the end of this organism, the end of this organism, these end cells are conical. They are different shaped than the rest of the cells. And therefore, these 3.5 billion year old microfossils that Dr. Schopf found are multicellular organisms. They have differentiated cells. The end cells are different than the rest of the cells. The claim that it took billions of years to get multicellular life is not true. There are no billions of years of time available for this to occur. Okay. Of course, there are critics to this view. Dr. Oleg Abramov and Stephen Mojzsis of the University of Colorado, they both suggest that Earth may not have been completely sterilized by 500-kilometer objects hitting the Earth. Everyone agrees, even them, that life at the surface of the Earth would have been vaporized, completely obliterated and vaporized and gone. The surface of the Earth would have been as hot as the surface of the Sun, as the video just showed you. However, Dr. Abramov and Dr. Mojzsis suggest that perhaps life could have survived underground in hot hydrothermal vents. In other words, heat-loving organisms might have survived deep underground, far enough away from the surface of the Earth, which is up against the superheated rock vapor. Perhaps life, heat-loving life could have survived deep underground. Now, for life to survive deep underground, first there has to be life. Okay. Now, there are very many big problems with this viewpoint, though, as we'll see. They suggest life might have been alive in hydrothermal vents deep underground. Many problems. Even if life somehow could have survived, if life existed, even if it could have somehow survived deep underground in hydrothermal vents, it was not photosynthetic life. Deep underground is dark. Photosynthetic life has to have light to survive. Dr. Minik Rosing's isotopic evidence for 3.8 plus billion year old life shows that it was photosynthetic life. We aren't discussing it in detail today, but if you look up the reference at the end of our video, you can see a video of Dr. Rosing explaining the difference between carbon-13, carbon-14, and showing that the life had to be photosynthetic life that he discovered, and that it was over at least 3.8 billion years old or older. As we said, photosynthetic life doesn't live in the dark. Also, we have a question here. Where is the time for evolution to turn primitive heat-loving organisms into advanced photosynthetic organisms? Let's suppose that somehow life could have survived in deep underground. It had to have turned from non-photosynthetic life into photosynthetic life in an amazingly short period of time in order to have 3.8 plus billion year old photosynthetic life discovered, or evidence of it discovered, by Dr. Rosing. Where is the time between the last superheated event from a collision event and life to turn into photosynthetic life? If a person believes that somehow evolution could have worked with amazing speed to turn primitive heat-loving organisms from deep in the dark underground into advanced photosynthetic life that required sunlight to live, if someone believes that happened amazingly fast through evolution, then how is it that for the next billion plus years we don't see any evidence of evolutionary change? In other words, from 3.8 billion years ago to 2.8 billion years ago, why don't we see many, many, many different organisms formed by this amazingly rapid evolution that apparently some people believe in? The amazingly fast evolution would have been required to turn primitive heat-loving organisms into advanced photosynthetic organisms. So if it was there for that, why don't we have amazingly fast evolution turning these tiny little organisms into thousands of other organisms? We don't see that. We don't have any evidence that it occurred. Other discoveries have been made, such as the enormous South Pole Aitken Basin on the moon. At the time that Dr. Carl Sagan made his statement, of course, he didn't know about this. This is from NASA, and I don't think you can see it well in the video, but right here there's an outline of the outer edges of this South Pole Aitken Basin. It's truly enormous. It is at the South Pole of the moon, and very difficult to see from the Earth. But what it shows is that basins even larger than the Imbrium Basin, for example, exist on the moon. And if even larger basins exist on the moon, that means larger objects were hitting the moon than was previously known, and so that larger objects than 500 kilometers were hitting the moon. Even scientists that believe perhaps a 500 kilometer object would not sterilize the Earth, they really don't doubt that much larger objects hitting the Earth would have sterilized the entire Earth. Dr. William Bottke, he's a scientist from the Southwest Research Institute in Boulder, Colorado. He has determined by his studies, including the South Pole Aitken Basin, but many, many other studies and evidence that he has has determined that the largest objects that hit the Earth were not 500 kilometer objects, but were 2,500 to 3,000 kilometer objects. I don't think any scientist doubts that an object that size would have completely sterilized the entire Earth. Here's a quote from him from a video that we will give a reference for at the end. He's talking to the SETI Institute, and he said, "So if this is right, we suggest that after the moon forming event took place, the Earth probably got hit by something maybe on the order of 2,500 to 3,000 kilometers." William Bottke, Southwest Research Institute, Boulder, Colorado. The reference for this I will give at the end of the video. Now, this is also from Dr. Bottke and several other scientists